Watch as a police dog's sharp instincts lead to an unexpected discovery that shocks airport officials. What they find inside the suitcase will leave you speechless. Write in the comments where you're watching this video from. And if you like the story, remember to subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell. The sun had barely risen, casting long shadows across the busy terminals of the international airport. The usual rush of travelers, suited businesspeople, and families navigating the vast halls gave way to the early morning quiet. A soft hum of activity lingered in the background, but for the most part, the airport was still adjusting to the day ahead. It was here, amidst the hustle and bustle of planes preparing for takeoff and travelers darting between gates, that Rex, a police dog with a seemingly unremarkable appearance, began his morning patrol. Rex was no different from many of the working dogs in law enforcement. With a sleek, muscular build and a well-groomed coat of sable fur, he blended seamlessly with his surroundings. A Belgian Malinois by breed, he had the powerful build of a shepherd but the speed and agility that made him an invaluable asset to the airport security team. His nose was his superpower, fine-tuned through years of training, capable of detecting the faintest sense of narcotics, explosives, or anything else that didn't belong. Rex didn't just walk through the terminals, he moved with purpose, like a silent sentinel, always alert, always on duty. Today was no different than any other. The airport security team was preparing for another typical shift. Rex's handler, Officer Thomas Williams, a man who had been partnered with the dog for over 3 years, walked alongside him. Thomas, dressed in his uniform, scanned the crowded terminal for anything out of the ordinary, his sharp eyes constantly darting between passengers, luggage, and potential threats. But it was Rex who was always one step ahead, his nose twitching with the potential of detecting something before anyone else could even notice it. Together, they were a seamless team, their bond unspoken but undeniable. Officer Williams had worked with Rex long enough to know that the dog wasn't just reacting to his commands. Rex was far more perceptive than that. The dog had a sixth sense, an uncanny ability to pick up on something before anyone could even see it. Whether it was a subtle shift in the air or an unusual odor, Rex's instincts were far sharper than any human's. It was as though he could sense danger, feel it in the way the crowd shifted or the way the air changed. Today, however, felt different. As they moved through the terminal, the usual chaos of airport life seemed to press in on them. There was a slight tension in the air, a sense that something was about to happen, though neither Officer Williams nor Rex could place it just yet. Perhaps it was the fleeting look of unease on some of the passengers' faces, or the way a few security personnel exchanged quick glances. But for the most part, it was just another day. Rex, however, was unusually alert. His head was constantly swiveling, his eyes scanning the crowd as his ears flicked at the smallest sounds. Every scent that wafted his way seemed to register with him, his keen sense of smell processing each new trail as it passed. It was a routine he had mastered, yet today there was a distinct feeling that something was off. As Officer Williams and Rex continued their patrol, they passed by a series of empty chairs near one of the boarding gates. The terminal was calm, with only a few passengers sitting and waiting for their flights. But as Rex's nose twitched, he suddenly slowed, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the area. His tail, usually held low in a relaxed position, began to stiffen slightly, a signal that he had caught wind of something. Officer Williams, noticing the change in Rex's behavior, immediately stopped and turned his gaze toward the direction the dog was focused on. It wasn't anything that immediately stood out. A lone suitcase sat against the wall, seemingly abandoned. But it was the way Rex was staring at it that made the officer pause. The dog wasn't simply looking. He was watching it intently, his body tense, his legs coiled as if preparing for action. Rex had been trained for this. For months, he had gone through countless drills where he was exposed to different situations, searching for hidden drugs, tracking scents, and even detecting explosives. Yet something about this particular moment felt different. The suitcase wasn't supposed to be there. It wasn't that Rex knew it had something dangerous inside, it was the strange, unexplainable pull in his instincts that made him single out that particular bag. Officer Williams had learned to trust Rex's hunches, no matter how small or insignificant they might seem to the human eye. Rex's instinct had saved lives in the past, and in moments like this, when the dog's behavior changed so noticeably, it was better to be cautious than to ignore it. "What do you have, boy?" Officer Williams murmured under his breath, his voice low but filled with the kind of respect and care only a handler who had spent years working side by side with his canine partner could muster. The dog responded with a quick glance up at him, a subtle nudge of his head toward the suitcase. There was no doubt now, the dog had singled it out for a reason. Rex began to move toward the suitcase, his body low to the ground, as though he was about to spring into action. His eyes never left the bag, and his movements were calculated, precise. His tail stayed still, a sign of his focus. Rex wasn't just sniffing around, it was as if he was investigating with purpose, something was pulling at his instincts. At this point, Officer Williams knew they had to act. He made a quick, deliberate gesture to his fellow officers, signaling for them to stand back and give them space. Rex had found something, and it was time to act. Rex moved closer to the suitcase, his paws light but sure on the polished tile. He stopped a mere foot away from the bag, inhaling deeply, his nose twitching as he processed the scent. The sound of his breathing was steady, but his focus was unmatched. There was no hesitation, no sign of uncertainty. Rex knew what he was doing. Officer Williams was now standing just behind him, watching carefully. The air between them felt charged with anticipation. There was a moment of stillness before Rex moved again. He reached out with his paw and lightly tapped the suitcase, then stepped back, his eyes never leaving it. This was Rex's way of signaling to his handler, "There's something in there, something that needs to be checked." The officer crouched down, taking careful note of every movement Rex made. He could see the dog's muscles tensing beneath his coat, his alert stance signaling that this wasn't just a routine search. Something about this bag had triggered a response deep within Rex, and Officer Williams had learned long ago that when the dog's instincts kicked in like this, it was time to pay attention. For a moment, nothing else in the world seemed to matter. The airport, the passengers, the planes, it all faded into the background. All that mattered now was the bond between the handler and his dog, the silent understanding that connected them in a way that only years of training and trust could create. Rex's sharp instincts and unwavering dedication had led them to this moment. A seemingly innocent suitcase, sitting alone in a crowded airport terminal, was now at the center of their attention. And though Officer Williams had no idea what they would find inside, he trusted Rex completely. The dog had never failed him. As Rex stood there, his body taut with concentration, Officer Williams knew they were on the verge of discovering something that could change the course of the day. The routine patrol had taken an unexpected turn, and it was all because of one dog's unshakable sense of duty. Rex didn't bark or growl, he didn't make a sound. He was simply watching. And in that moment, Officer Williams understood that Rex wasn't just doing his job, he was protecting the airport, the passengers, and the people he'd been trained to serve. He was the unlikely hero in a world that often overlooked the quiet, unsung protectors like him. But Rex had sensed it. He had smelled the danger long before anyone else even noticed. And now, he was ready to uncover whatever lay hidden inside the suitcase. The real question was, what would they find? The morning was typical for an airport on a busy weekday. Passengers hurried to and fro, pushing carts stacked high with luggage, their faces filled with a mix of excitement, impatience, and exhaustion. The soft hum of announcements crackled over the intercom, a steady rhythm punctuating the air, while the clicking sound of rolling suitcases echoed through the terminals. The security team moved seamlessly through the crowd, their eyes scanning the busy surroundings, ready for any situation that might arise. But today, something was different. Rex, the police dog, had been on duty for over 4 years. He was no stranger to the airport's bustling environment, having walked these same corridors countless times. He'd sniffed bags, checked cargo, and even accompanied his handler, Officer Williams, on routine patrols. He was a well-trained dog with an unmatched sense of smell, capable of detecting explosives, narcotics, and anything out of the ordinary with surgical precision. His presence was reassuring to those around him, a silent protector in the middle of a chaotic environment. Yet, despite the monotony of his work, there was always that gut feeling, the one that told him when things weren't quite right. It was something intangible, a sense of unease that settled in his chest like a storm cloud on the horizon. And today, that feeling was gnawing at him, sharpening his instincts into a laser focus. Rex and Officer Williams moved casually through the terminal, their eyes sweeping over the crowd, their senses attuned to every sound and movement. The team worked well together, communicating with barely a glance. Rex had become so accustomed to the airport's routine that he knew when to stay alert and when to relax. He had learned the subtle rhythms of the airport over the years, where people tended to linger, where luggage was often abandoned, and which areas had the highest foot traffic. But something was off today. He could feel it. They were walking near Gate 12 when it happened. Rex's ears pricked up, his tail stiffened, and his nostrils flared. His handler, Officer Williams, noticed the subtle shift in Rex's behavior immediately. Rex's movements had slowed, his posture had changed, and there was a slight tension in his body. It was something only an experienced handler would recognize. The dog was picking up on something. The air around them seemed to shift ever so slightly, as if the environment itself had changed in response to some unseen force. Rex's eyes locked onto a specific spot near the seating area, a cluster of chairs where passengers sat, waiting for their flights. And if you like the story, remember to subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell. There, in the midst of the busy terminal, stood a lone suitcase. It was a simple black carry-on, nothing extraordinary, yet something about it struck Rex as wrong. The bag was placed in an odd spot, far from the crowd, almost as if it had been deliberately set down. It wasn't the typical place where a passenger would leave their belongings. Most people would leave their bags by their side, or at least close to their seat, but this one sat abandoned, off to the side, almost as if it had been forgotten. Rex's ears twitched. His heightened sense of smell kicked in, and he detected something. It wasn't just the scent of the typical airport smells, the perfumes, food, and disinfectants. No, there was something else, a faint, unfamiliar odor wafting from the suitcase that sent a ripple of unease through Rex's body. It wasn't a normal scent, it was something deeper, more insidious. His instincts were on high alert. Officer Williams had also noticed the bag. The way it sat in the open, neglected and out of place, caught his attention as well. He instinctively placed a hand on Rex's harness, signaling to him that something was about to happen. The dog, as always, was ready to spring into action. "Go ahead, Rex," Officer Williams whispered, his voice calm but commanding. It was a simple instruction, one that Rex had heard hundreds of times, but today, it felt different. Rex didn't need any further prompting. His training kicked in, and he immediately started moving toward the suitcase. Rex's steps were measured, his movements precise as he neared the abandoned piece of luggage. His nose was close to the ground, searching, analyzing. He paused for a moment, inhaling deeply, his entire body tense with anticipation. The scent was stronger now, unmistakable. The dog's eyes narrowed, and a subtle growl rumbled from his chest, a sound of warning, but also of determination. This wasn't just an abandoned suitcase, it was something far more dangerous. The air around them seemed to hum with tension, the sounds of the airport fading into the background as Rex's instincts took over. Officer Williams remained just behind him, keeping his eyes trained on the suitcase, his mind racing through the possibilities. Could it be explosives? Drugs? Or something else entirely? Whatever it was, Rex had sensed it before he did. And that was the thing about working with a dog like Rex. He had a sixth sense, a powerful ability to detect danger before it even fully materialized. It was something that no human could replicate, and Officer Williams knew to trust it with his life. Rex circled the suitcase once, sniffing it from every angle, his nose twitching as he carefully examined the object. The bag was solid, not overly heavy, but there was an unsettling vibe to it, something that felt wrong in every way. It was the kind of feeling you couldn't quite explain, the kind of intuition that only the most finely tuned of instincts could detect. And for Rex, this was his moment. The dog stopped in front of the suitcase and sat down, his posture stiff, his eyes locked on the object with an intensity that was almost unnatural. He was alert, waiting for his handler's next move. His tail didn't wag, nor did he bark. He had no need to make a sound. His stillness, his silence, spoke volumes. There was danger here, and Rex wasn't going to back down until he understood it. Officer Williams knelt beside Rex, his hand gently brushing the dog's fur as he assessed the situation. "What is it, boy?" he muttered under his breath, eyes flicking from Rex to the suitcase. The dog's body language told him everything he needed to know. This was serious. Officer Williams reached for his radio, his fingers moving quickly to alert the team. "Team, we've got a situation here. Unattended suitcase near gate 12. Rex is signaling something unusual. Stand by for further instructions." He spoke quietly into the device, his voice steady but firm. As the radio crackled with a response, Officer Williams continued to observe Rex's behavior. The dog's sharp eyes never left the suitcase, his focus absolute. The growl in Rex's throat had stopped, but the tension in his body remained. Officer Williams could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. This wasn't a routine check. This was different. Rex's instincts had kicked in, and they couldn't ignore that. A small crowd had begun to gather around the area, unaware of the escalating situation. People glanced nervously at the suitcase, unsure of what to make of it. Some looked at Rex with curiosity, others with concern. But Officer Williams and Rex knew the truth before anyone else did. Something was wrong, and they needed to act fast. Rex was a trained police dog, his skills honed over years of work in airports, at crime scenes, and on the streets. His training had taught him to remain calm under pressure, to focus on the task at hand, and to trust his nose above all else. And today, that training was guiding him toward a discovery that could save countless lives. As more officers arrived on the scene, Officer Williams signaled to one of the nearest security staff to keep the crowd back. They needed space to work, and they couldn't afford any distractions. The tension was palpable now, everyone aware that something wasn't right, but no one fully understanding just how serious the situation was. Rex remained focused on the suitcase, his body still and poised. His nose twitched once more, as if confirming his initial suspicions. There was something inside that bag, something that wasn't supposed to be there. Rex's job was far from over. And the airport, which had once been a place of routine and calm, was now a ground zero for something far darker than anyone could have predicted. The air was thick with the noise of travelers rushing past, the constant chatter of people hurrying to gates, the beep of ticket scanners, and the occasional call for boarding over the intercom. But for Rex, a police dog with a coat of deep sable fur, everything around him faded into a blur. His sharp, coal-black eyes scanned the area with practiced precision, his paws lightly patting against the terminal floor as he trotted beside his handler, Officer Williams. Rex had seen it all before, crowded terminals, the endless flow of passengers, the occasional misplaced bag, but today was different. Today, there was something in the air, something that didn't quite feel right. Officer Williams, who had partnered with Rex for nearly 3 years, felt a subtle shift in the dog's behavior. Rex had always been attentive, but now there was a certain tautness to his movements, a quiet intensity in the way his nose twitched and his ears flicked. They passed a crowded coffee shop, and Rex's head turned slightly as if sensing something just out of view. Officer Williams was quick to notice. "Rex," he murmured softly, his hand resting gently on the dog's harness. Rex had been trained to respond to situations where his instincts were crucial, but there had been no apparent signs of danger. Still, something in the dog's demeanor piqued Williams' curiosity. Rex wasn't one to act without reason. His nose flared, drawing in the scent of the bustling crowd, the warm air of freshly brewed coffee, the distinct scent of luggage, and then, something else. It was faint, but unmistakable. Rex's body tensed as his eyes locked on a suitcase that had been left sitting unattended by a row of chairs near gate 16. The bag, a black hard-shell suitcase with a red tag flapping loosely from the handle, didn't seem unusual at first glance. But Rex, with his finely tuned sense of smell, had detected something hidden beneath the surface. There was an odor, one he hadn't encountered before in his years of service. It wasn't the smell of typical luggage contents. No, this was something far more sinister. Rex's tail stood still, betraying no emotion, but his instincts were on high alert. He paused for a moment, staring intently at the suitcase, his nose twitching slightly as if trying to decipher the air around it. Officer Williams noticed a shift in Rex's posture immediately, a calm yet powerful energy radiating from the dog as he moved into a more focused stance. It was as if Rex knew something the humans didn't, something crucial, and now it was up to Williams to trust his partner's instincts. Williams stopped walking and crouched down to Rex's level. "What is it, boy?" he whispered, his voice low and calm, knowing that Rex was about to do something important. The police dog turned his head slightly toward Williams, his eyes filled with silent determination. There was no bark, no growl, just the quiet connection between the two that spoke volumes. Officer Williams knew better than to question Rex's instincts. If Rex was focused on that suitcase, there was a reason. "Alert," Williams commanded, his voice firm but steady. Rex responded instantly. He darted forward, his paws moving quickly across the polished tile, his body low and fluid as he navigated the crowd. People around them barely took notice as the dog weaved through the terminal, but to those who did, there was a strange urgency to his movements. Rex's pace quickened with every step, his snout now inches from the suitcase. He circled it once, sniffing the air around it, before dropping his nose to the handle. His breathing was steady, but beneath it, there was a growing tension. This wasn't a random reaction. Rex was alerting to something serious. Officer Williams was right behind him, his eyes now narrowing, scanning the scene. He could feel the shift in the air, the heightened tension that seemed to settle over them like a heavy fog. It wasn't just the dog's focus that had changed, something was off about the entire scene. Rex wasn't a dog who reacted to every stray scent. This was different. As Rex continued to circle the suitcase, Officer Williams moved quickly, stepping into the space between the luggage and the surrounding crowd. He made a brief motion toward two nearby airport security guards, signaling for them to approach. "Stay close," he instructed, his voice calm yet authoritative. "Keep your eyes on the area." The two guards, sensing the seriousness of the moment, positioned themselves a few feet away, glancing around at the growing crowd of onlookers who were beginning to take notice of the commotion. Rex, still focused on the suitcase, paused for a moment and sat down, his signal. It was subtle, but unmistakable. This wasn't just a sniffing session. This was an alert. He had found something that warranted further investigation. Officer Williams was quick to pull out his radio, his fingers moving with swift precision as he contacted the bomb squad. They trained for these moments. When a dog like Rex showed this level of attention, it wasn't to be taken lightly. "We've got a situation at Gate 16, Williams said, his voice low but steady. "Rex has alerted to an unattended suitcase, requesting immediate assistance." There was a brief pause on the other end before the calm, reassuring voice of the dispatcher responded. "Copy that, Officer Williams. Units are en route. Keep your distance from the suitcase and await further instructions." "Understood." Williams clipped the radio back to his uniform and returned his focus to Rex. The dog's eyes were fixed on the suitcase, and for a moment, it felt as if time had stopped. The terminal, which moments ago had been bustling with life, was now eerily quiet. Travelers moved around them, but there was a sense that something big was unfolding, though no one quite knew what it was. Rex didn't move. His eyes never left the suitcase, his posture unyielding. There was no hesitation, no doubt in his mind that this was the moment to act. He trusted his training, he trusted his handler, and most of all, he trusted himself. It wasn't just a job for Rex, it was his duty. This was the moment he had been preparing for all his life, though he never asked for the recognition. His job was simple: protect, detect, and serve. The minutes stretched on, though they felt like hours. Officer Williams stayed close to Rex, his own pulse quickening as the reality of the situation set in. The passengers around them were still oblivious, going about their business, checking their watches, readjusting their luggage. But the officers knew something that the others didn't. Rex had found something. Something that could change everything. And then, almost as if on cue, the sound of footsteps echoed through the terminal as a bomb squad team arrived. They moved with swift efficiency, their tactical gear gleaming under the overhead lights. One of the bomb technicians, a tall man with a calm expression, knelt beside Rex, his eyes scanning the suitcase with practiced ease. Rex didn't flinch. He simply stared at the suitcase, waiting for the next order. Officer Williams stepped back slightly, allowing the bomb squad to take over. The technician examined the suitcase carefully, using a specialized device to scan for any potential threats. He moved in a deliberate pattern, checking every seam, every corner of the bag. Rex remained poised, his alertness unwavering. This was a waiting game now, a game of patience and trust. Then, without warning, the technician's eyes narrowed as he detected something on his screen. "We've got a possible hit," he said quietly, but firmly. "Keep the area clear." Officer Williams felt a surge of adrenaline rush through him. Rex had done his job. The dog's instinct, honed over years of training, had led them here. It was no coincidence. And in that moment, the reality of what was happening started to sink in. What had initially seemed like an ordinary day at the airport had now turned into something far more critical. Rex had just saved lives. The noise of the airport faded into the background as Rex's senses sharpened. His nostrils flared, and his ears pricked up with an intensity that only an animal of his training could possess. He stood, his powerful frame poised in stillness, like a sentry on alert. Something in the air had changed. It was subtle, almost imperceptible to the casual observer, but to Rex, the difference was obvious. Rex was no ordinary dog. He had been trained to detect threats, to protect those around him, to serve his country with a loyalty that ran deeper than mere obedience. And today, the normally bustling atmosphere of the airport had turned into something more. There was a weight in the air that he couldn't shake, something that seemed to grow with every passing second. His instincts, honed over years of training and countless hours on duty, screamed at him that this was not just any ordinary suitcase. Rex wasn't a dog that typically showed fear, but something about this moment made him uneasy. It wasn't fear in the traditional sense, but rather a gnawing feeling in the pit of his stomach. He could sense that this bag, sitting there alone, unattended, in the middle of a busy airport terminal, was different. And in his gut, Rex knew that it wasn't just a forgotten piece of luggage. It was something more dangerous, something sinister. His handler, Officer Williams, had noticed the shift in Rex's posture. For the past few minutes, Williams had been keeping an eye on the dog, watching as Rex sniffed the air, his movements precise and measured, clearly on high alert. Officer Williams had been around long enough to recognize when Rex was picking up on something unusual, but this was different. And if you like the story, remember to subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell. Rex wasn't just responding to a scent or a change in the environment. There was a palpable sense of urgency in the way he stood there, staring at the suitcase as if it were a puzzle that needed to be solved. The dog's body had stiffened, his legs planted firmly, a clear signal that he was preparing for action. But Rex didn't rush in. Instead, he paused, taking his time to analyze the situation, as if listening to a whisper only he could hear. Every inch of his body seemed to vibrate with purpose, like a coiled spring ready to snap. "Rex," Officer Williams whispered, his voice barely audible over the low hum of the airport, "what is it, boy?" The question hung in the air, but there was no immediate response. Rex didn't look back at his handler, his focus unwavering. The suitcase sat there, its form innocuous to any casual observer, but to Rex, it was an enigma. Something was hidden beneath its exterior, and it was his job to uncover it. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, Rex began to move toward the suitcase. His paws made no sound as they glided over the polished floor, his body low, his tail stiff. His eyes never left the bag, the intensity in his gaze now matched by the deliberate precision of his movements. As he closed the distance between himself and the suitcase, a strange feeling washed over him. His heart pounded in his chest, not with the frantic energy of a chase, but with the calm, focused intensity of a dog who had encountered something deeply unsettling. The scent, though faint, was unmistakable, a combination of something chemical, foreign, and unfamiliar. Rex could smell the danger, and it was only growing stronger with each step he took. His nose reached the suitcase. The familiar click of his claws on the floor faded as his breathing slowed. Every part of him seemed to lock into place as he brought his snout to the suitcase, his senses finally attuned to the objects before him. The scent that hit him now was sharper, more pungent, more specific. It wasn't just a piece of luggage. It was something designed to carry something more dangerous, something hidden deep inside. Rex's tail twitched, betraying the tension coursing through his body. He felt it again, the sensation that this was no ordinary find. His paws lightly brushed against the suitcase, urging it, almost pleading for someone to take notice. He pawed again, his claws clicking against the fabric, his nose brushing against the seams. It was as though he could sense the urgency of the moment, the gravity of what was at stake. There was something inside that wasn't supposed to be there. Rex had no way of knowing what was hidden in the suitcase, but he understood his job. His job wasn't to ask questions or understand the reasons behind the items he discovered. His job was to find them and alert his handler. And as he continued to paw gently at the suitcase, it was clear that his message was simple: there's something here. Something dangerous. Someone needs to act. Officer Williams had been watching closely, waiting for a sign, for Rex to make the next move. Rex's behavior was unmistakable. He had encountered hundreds of suspicious packages before, but this was different. This wasn't just a scent to be cataloged and moved past. This was something that required attention, something that needed immediate action. It was a plea in the form of a dog's pawing, a silent warning that reverberated through the air. "All right, boy. Let's see what we've got," Williams muttered, more to himself than to Rex. His hands were steady as he reached for the zipper of the suitcase, though his heart raced in his chest. He knew that Rex had uncovered something, and the longer they waited, the more that sense of unease grew. Every moment counted now. It wasn't just about following protocol, it was about preventing a catastrophe. Rex's trained instincts had already laid the groundwork, and now it was up to the officers to take action. As Williams slowly unzipped the suitcase, the tension in the air was palpable. Rex stayed by his side, his focus never wavering. His gaze remained fixed on the bag, his body tense, as if his very presence was an integral part of solving the mystery. There was an unspoken bond between them, one that transcended words. Rex didn't need to explain himself, he had done his part. Now, it was time for Williams to do his. The suitcase opened with a soft whoosh, and immediately, the contents came into view. What they found inside was unexpected, to say the least. Hidden beneath layers of clothing and neatly packed items was something far more disturbing. A sealed container, wrapped in plastic, with strange markings and labels that sent a chill down Williams' spine. Rex stood still, his body rigid, as if awaiting the confirmation of what he already knew. His ears flicked, his tail stiffened, and though he didn't bark or make a sound, the quiet presence of the dog spoke volumes. This was no coincidence. Rex had sensed danger long before anyone else had a clue. The realization settled in slowly for Williams. This wasn't a simple mishap or an innocent mistake. What Rex had uncovered was a deliberate attempt to hide something dangerous. The kind of thing that could wreak havoc if left unchecked. The suitcase wasn't just a bag, it was a vessel, carrying a threat, and Rex had been the first to uncover it. Rex, for his part, remained calm but alert. There was no visible relief in his posture, no sense of satisfaction at having completed the task. For him, this was simply another day on the job. Another instance of him doing what he was trained to do, without fanfare or recognition. His job wasn't to understand the full scope of the danger, it was to act, to find, and to alert. But in this moment, as the authorities closed in to investigate further, it was impossible to ignore the silent bond between Rex and his handler, the unspoken understanding that one had done their part, and the other would follow through. Rex had saved lives today, not with a dramatic display of heroism, but with quiet focus, and the steadfast determination that comes with being a dog who knows his purpose. As the officials began to swarm around the suitcase, taking pictures and documenting the discovery, Rex took a small step back, allowing the humans to take over. His job was done, and though he was exhausted from the alert, there was a sense of satisfaction that washed over him. He had done what he was trained to do, and in that moment, that was enough. The danger had been averted, and the rest would fall into place. Rex sat quietly beside Officer Williams, watching as the officers continued their investigation, his tail slowly wagging. The danger had passed, and for now, there was nothing more he could do. But as they left the scene, one thing was certain: Rex had once again proven that he was more than just a dog. He was a protector, a loyal companion, and the uncelebrated hero who stood between danger and the lives of those he was sworn to protect. The air was thick with tension, and the normally bustling terminal had fallen eerily quiet. Officers and airport security surrounded the suitcase that had drawn Rex's attention, their eyes fixed on the strange object. There was no question now, something was off. Rex, a seasoned police dog, stood a few feet back from the suitcase, his nose still twitching as he inhaled the sharp scent lingering in the air. His muscles were taut, his instinct screaming that this wasn't just an abandoned bag left behind by a forgetful traveler. No, this was something far more serious. Officer Williams, his handler, stood to the side, watching Rex with a knowing gaze. He trusted the dog with his life, and today, that trust would be tested in ways neither of them could have anticipated. Careful, Officer Williams murmured to his colleagues, his voice low, eyes scanning the suitcase. Let's see what's inside. The surrounding officers took a cautious step back, creating a circle around the suitcase as if it were a fragile bomb waiting to explode. Rex's eyes followed every movement, his alert posture unwavering. His senses were overwhelmed by the scent of chemicals, something volatile, but he couldn't quite place it. He had sniffed out narcotics before, and he had been called to search for explosives. This, however, felt different. There was a darker undertone to the smell, something far more dangerous than any illegal substance he had encountered in the past. One of the officers, a senior member of the security team, knelt beside the suitcase, his gloved hands slowly reaching for the zipper. Rex shifted his weight, instinctively moving forward, though his handler had commanded him to stay put. It wasn't just the bag that held Rex's attention, it was the unsettling sense of urgency deep within him. Something was wrong, and he knew it. The hair on his neck bristled. "Easy, Rex," Officer Williams murmured, but his words were more for reassurance than a command. The dog was already on edge, and any further stress could affect his judgment. The officer with the gloves slowly pulled the zipper, exposing the contents of the suitcase inch by inch. As the bag opened, an unexpected sight greeted the team. At first, it was hard to make sense of what they were seeing. Inside the suitcase was a mass of carefully arranged packages wrapped in dark, plastic foil. They were small, cylindrical, and neatly packed, almost like the kind of gear you might find in a professional kit, but this wasn't the kind of thing that was supposed to be inside a suitcase in a public airport. Rex's nose twitched as he sniffed at the air again, now more focused than ever. His breathing was steady, controlled, but there was an underlying anxiety in his movements. The bags in front of him were starting to look less like the kind of illegal substances he had been trained to detect. No, these were different. They were new. Rex's instincts screamed at him that this wasn't just a drug bust or a routine threat. It was something far more complex. The officer peered into the suitcase, his eyes narrowing. He exchanged a glance with Officer Williams. "These look like explosives," the officer said quietly, his voice tinged with disbelief. "Or at least some kind of remote-triggered device. We need to alert bomb squad, now." Rex shifted uneasily on his paws, sensing the shift in the officer's demeanor. The calm, controlled atmosphere they had been maintaining was evaporating, replaced by the chilling weight of a potential catastrophe. The moment of discovery felt like an earthquake in slow motion, a ripple of dread spreading outward, reaching every corner of the terminal. Rex's alert stance didn't waver, but it was as if he could feel the heat of the situation building, a quiet storm just beyond the horizon. "Call it in," Officer Williams barked, his hand moving instinctively toward his earpiece. His calm, authoritative tone didn't betray the urgency bubbling underneath. The officer holding the suitcase carefully stepped away, taking no chances, and the rest of the team backed up in unison. Rex remained still, as if he too had become one with the moment, sensing that the dangerous discovery wasn't just a job for the human team. He had to play his part, as he always did. The seconds stretched into what felt like hours as the bomb squad was alerted. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. In those moments, as Officer Williams made the call, Rex's gaze was fixed on the suitcase. It wasn't just his training guiding him now, it was a deep, innate understanding of the gravity of the situation. He had seen his share of dangerous contraband, but this felt different. Something about the precision with which the packages were wrapped, the care taken in their placement within the suitcase, it all pointed to a sinister, carefully planned operation. "Where did this suitcase come from?" Officer Williams asked, his voice steady despite the situation at hand. A younger officer, one of the airport security team, stepped forward, clutching a clipboard in his hands. "It came in from Flight 324, just an hour ago," he said, his voice trembling slightly under the pressure. "It was unclaimed. Left near the gate with no one around." "Did anyone see who put it there?" Officer Williams asked, a note of concern creeping into his tone. "No one, sir. The bag was just sitting there, like someone had abandoned it." Officer Williams exhaled slowly, his eyes narrowing as he processed the information. There were too many unanswered questions. Too many pieces that didn't add up. The suitcase had been left intentionally, placed in a location where it could be found, probably to draw attention, to create a diversion. But why? And who would go through the effort of packing explosives or whatever those packages were into a suitcase, only to leave it unattended? "Where's the nearest exit for Flight 324? Officer Williams asked suddenly. The younger officer blinked, confused by the question. "That's Gate 12, sir." "Then we have to move fast," Officer Williams said, his voice cutting through the tension. "Whoever left that bag here might still be around. Keep your eyes peeled." Rex shifted his weight again, taking a few cautious steps closer to the suitcase. His mind wasn't just focused on the object in front of him, it was processing everything around him. His nose, sharp as a blade, was still working overtime. He could smell the faintest trace of something on the suitcase itself, something familiar, but faintly out of place. The scent of sweat, the faint smell of a distant, greasy food vendor. But that didn't matter now. What mattered was that there was a far more dangerous threat at hand, one that only he had uncovered. The bomb squad arrived moments later, a team of highly trained professionals who moved with precise coordination. One of them, a veteran officer with years of experience, stepped forward and knelt beside the suitcase. The team of officers, including Williams, watched silently, their breath held in collective suspense. "This is a big one," the veteran bomb squad officer murmured as he carefully examined the devices inside the suitcase. His voice was calm, but Rex could hear the unspoken weight behind it. This wasn't just a routine situation. This was a crisis waiting to happen. The officer's fingers moved with a practiced ease as he carefully manipulated the wires, noting the distinct shape of the devices within the bags. His eyes flicked to his colleagues, signaling the seriousness of the discovery. "What do we have?" Officer Williams asked, his voice sharp. The bomb squad officer exhaled slowly. "It's definitely an improvised explosive device. Remote triggered. This could have gone off at any moment." Rex's ears perked up at the words. The gravity of the situation hit him like a ton of bricks. His tail, which had been stiff with tension, now drooped low, almost as if he were in mourning. He had known it, hadn't he? His instincts had never let him down. The danger had been real, and today, he had been the one to stand guard and find the threat before it could wreak havoc. He had saved countless lives today, but he knew he couldn't rest until the threat was neutralized completely. The bomb squad continued their work, carefully defusing the devices one by one, and as they did, the officers began to look at Rex in awe. He had done it again, he had protected them, and he had protected everyone in the terminal without a second thought. The suitcase had been his focus, but now that it was safely in the hands of the experts, he could finally breathe easier. But for Rex, it wasn't about the recognition. It was about knowing that he had done his job. He had done what he had been trained to do. And that was enough. Rex, the police dog, stood motionless beside his handler, Officer Williams. The airport terminal had erupted into a whirlwind of activity after the suitcase was discovered, but Rex remained eerily calm, his intense gaze locked on the unfolding scene. His mission was complete, his role fulfilled. But in this moment, as the officers scrambled to investigate the contents of the suitcase, there was a strange, almost haunting quietness about him. He had done what he was trained to do, yet no one was fully aware of just how critical his actions had been. For Rex, it wasn't about the recognition, the accolades, or the spotlight. It was about loyalty, instinct, and duty. Officer Williams, standing beside Rex, could see the subtle shifts in his dog's posture. Rex had been trained to act without hesitation, to follow orders swiftly and without question. His eyes remained trained on the suitcase, as though he were still processing the weight of what had just happened. Williams, too, felt the gravity of the situation. He had witnessed Rex's extraordinary instincts countless times before, but today, there was something different in the air. The quiet, almost reverent stillness surrounding Rex was palpable. Around them, airport security and law enforcement officers were swarming, securing the area and beginning to examine the suitcase's contents. Rex, however, showed no signs of distraction. He sat patiently, his tail resting gently against the polished floor, his ears occasionally twitching at the sound of distant voices and radio chatter. Though the airport was alive with urgency and confusion, Rex's presence felt like a calm in the storm. It was a strange contrast, this chaos swirling around a dog who simply knew what needed to be done. As the investigation progressed, a growing sense of disbelief rippled through the crowd. The suitcase, which had been left unattended in the busy terminal, contained far more than anyone could have expected. Hidden inside were items that suggested a potential security threat, possibly something more sinister than anyone could have imagined. But despite the rising tension, Rex didn't waver. His eyes, alert and unwavering, held onto the suitcase, as if reminding everyone that he was the one who had noticed it in the first place. There was a strange kind of connection between Rex and the object in front of him. It wasn't just an inanimate suitcase to him, it was a potential danger, something his instincts had warned him about. Rex didn't need to understand the complex nature of the threat, he simply needed to know that it was there, and it was his job to protect the people around him from it. In that moment, his bond with the suitcase was unspoken, but powerful. Officer Williams watched Rex, a flicker of pride mixed with concern crossing his face. He knew how much Rex had given in his role as a police dog. The training, the countless hours of practice, the days of running drills, it all led to moments like this, where Rex's actions could mean the difference between life and death. But it was a hard job, and not everyone understood what it took to be a police dog. They saw the dog, but rarely did they see the soul behind the fur, the quiet courage that pushed him to always do more, to always protect, even when no one was looking. The officers continued their search, carefully unzipping the suitcase and inspecting its contents. As the zipper slid open, the mystery of what was inside began to unfold. Papers, wires, and an assortment of objects spilled out, each one seemingly ordinary at first glance. But as the officers dug deeper, they uncovered something much darker. It was clear now that this wasn't an isolated incident, it was part of something larger, something far more dangerous. But still, Rex sat silently, watching. His mission had been accomplished, but the danger had yet to be fully realized. In the midst of the chaos, Rex remained a constant. His body was poised, but his mind was elsewhere, processing the moment in his own way. He had always been the quiet one, the dog who didn't seek attention but rather let his actions speak for themselves. Today was no different. Rex wasn't here for the accolades. He wasn't looking for praise or recognition. He was here to protect, and that was enough. As the suitcase's contents were carefully cataloged and analyzed, it became clear that Rex's instincts had been right all along. The items inside weren't just suspicious, they were the building blocks of a far-reaching plot that, if left unchecked, could have caused immense harm. The officials were now fully aware of the gravity of the situation. What had seemed like an ordinary suitcase left behind by a distracted traveler was actually part of a well-planned operation, one that might have gone unnoticed had it not been for Rex's quick thinking and impeccable senses. For Rex, however, the discovery didn't feel like a victory. It wasn't about the shock and awe of what had been found. It wasn't about the fact that the authorities were now in control of a dangerous situation. No, for Rex, it was simply a job well done. He had done what he was trained to do, what he was born to do. He had protected those around him. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't flashy. It was just what he did. Officer Williams gave Rex a soft pat on the head, a silent thank you for a job completed. Rex turned his head slightly, meeting Williams' eyes for a moment, his tail giving a small, almost imperceptible wag. There was no need for words. They understood each other in a way that went beyond language. It was a bond forged through years of working side by side, of trusting each other implicitly. But as the chaos of the moment began to settle, and as Rex remained by his handler's side, a new reality started to take shape. The crowd was dispersing, the suitcase had been removed, and the situation was under control. Yet the quiet bond between Rex and Williams remained unshakable, unwavering. They had faced danger together, and in the end, it was their partnership that had made all the difference. The media would later report on the incident, highlighting the sharp instincts of the police dog that had saved countless lives. Rex would be celebrated in the press, and his heroism would be recognized far and wide. But none of that mattered to Rex. He didn't care for the headlines or the cameras that would inevitably capture his moment of triumph. He didn't need the spotlight. His sense of duty was his reward, and that was enough. Rex's legacy was never about the recognition he received, but about the quiet, unsung acts of bravery he displayed every single day. In the shadow of flashing lights and news cameras, Rex remained the humble, steadfast protector, a dog who never needed to seek fame, but instead chose to let his actions speak louder than any words could. As the day came to a close and Rex was led back to his kennel, a sense of peace washed over him. His tail wagged lightly as Officer Williams gave him another pat, a silent acknowledgement of everything they had accomplished together. Rex wasn't just a police dog. He was a hero, a silent hero whose quiet courage would continue to make the world a safer place, one instinctive action at a time. And so, as Rex lay down to rest, his mind calm and his body exhausted from the day's events, he knew that his work was far from over. Tomorrow would bring another challenge, another opportunity to protect those around him. But for tonight, Rex allowed himself a rare moment of stillness. He had done his part, and now he could rest. In the end, Rex's actions spoke volumes, not through the applause of a crowd, but through the simple, quiet understanding between a police dog and his handler. A bond that was forged in trust, in loyalty, and in a shared commitment to protecting those who needed it the most. Rex was not just a dog doing a job, he was a protector, a partner, and above all, an unsung hero who would continue to stand watch, day after day, for as long as he was needed. The day had been long, filled with tension, excitement, and a growing sense of importance. Rex, the police dog, had done his part. He had acted swiftly, trusted his instincts, and, most importantly, had kept everyone safe. Now, as the dust settled around him, he sat in the corner of the room, his powerful body still and his gaze focused ahead. His handler, Officer Williams, was busy talking to other officers, reviewing the events that had just transpired. The team was still processing the discovery in the suitcase, trying to make sense of the implications of what Rex had uncovered. The emotional whirlwind that had swept through the airport had now faded into a quiet, almost surreal calm. Rex, despite being physically drained, couldn't shake the deep, resonating feeling that lingered within him. He was still on high alert, despite the immediate danger being over. That instinct, trained into him from the earliest days of his career, had become second nature, and it didn't shut off just because the action had slowed. And if you like the story, remember to subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell. He had uncovered something dangerous, something that could have taken countless lives had it not been for his sharp nose and his lightning-fast reflexes. But now, his role in this operation was complete. The suitcase was in the hands of the authorities, the threat neutralized, and the chaos had given way to calm. Rex had done his job, and yet, the weight of that responsibility still pressed heavily on his chest. As he sat quietly, his fur glistening under the bright overhead lights, his breathing gradually slowed, but the tension in his body didn't entirely fade. The adrenaline that had surged through his veins only moments earlier was still a vivid memory, and it was as if a part of that energy had settled deep inside him. His eyes, typically calm and observant, now flickered toward the other officers as they exchanged notes and briefings. Though Rex was just a dog to most, to those who truly understood, he was a trusted partner, more than just a tool for detection, but a companion who could sense danger long before it appeared. He couldn't quite understand what had happened in human terms, but he could feel the gravity of the moment. His connection with Officer Williams was immediate and unspoken. They were a team, a partnership forged through years of trust and mutual respect. Officer Williams had always known when Rex was alert to something, when his dog's instincts kicked in. They'd been through so many situations together, and Rex had never let him down. But today, something had felt different. There was a sense of urgency in the air as they approached the suitcase that didn't sit right with Rex. His heightened senses had picked up on something that was just off, something that couldn't be ignored. Now, as Officer Williams finished speaking with his colleagues, the weight of the discovery that had been made started to sink in. They were still piecing together the significance of the contents found inside the suitcase. Whatever was inside had undoubtedly been intended for something far worse than the routine airport operations they were used to. Rex's role had been pivotal. He had found it when no one else had noticed, acting without hesitation. His paws had tapped at the suitcase as if pleading with the world to understand that it was more than just a bag, it was a ticking clock, waiting to go off. And, with the intervention of Rex's sharp instincts, it never did. But Rex didn't understand that part. He didn't understand the complexities of human threats or the gravity of a potential disaster. For Rex, it wasn't about the contents of the suitcase, it was about one thing: protecting. The concept of protection had been instilled in him from the very beginning of his training. It was all he knew. He didn't know why the suitcase was dangerous or why it mattered so much, but he had a duty to respond when danger was near. He had a responsibility that, over the years, had become ingrained in his very DNA. And in that moment, it was all he needed to know. As Rex sat silently on the floor, his mind began to wander back to his early days on the job. He remembered the first time he was introduced to Officer Williams, a moment that felt like fate, even if neither of them knew it at the time. It had been just another routine assignment for the young officer, but for Rex, it had been the beginning of a bond that would shape the rest of his life. He recalled the first time Williams had looked at him, a slight smile on his face as he patted Rex's head, a gesture of trust. From that moment on, Rex had known what it meant to protect. That bond had grown stronger over time. They were more than just a handler and a dog, they were family. Rex had learned everything from Williams: how to read the smallest of cues, how to be patient when waiting for orders, and, most importantly, how to know when to act. Every mission they had gone on together was another chance to prove that this partnership, built on respect and mutual understanding, was stronger than any obstacle they faced. Today was no different. The moment Rex had seen the suitcase, his training kicked in without hesitation. His body had gone into action, his paws moving swiftly toward the object that didn't belong. It was in his nature to protect, to find the danger before it was too late. Officer Williams had been right beside him, reading his every move, trusting his partner to lead the way. Together, they had navigated through the unknown and faced what others couldn't see. But now, as Rex sat in the quiet aftermath, he felt the weight of what he had just experienced. It wasn't a feeling of fear or confusion, it was the burden of responsibility that came with being a protector. Rex had no idea what would have happened if he hadn't reacted the way he did, but it didn't matter. What mattered was that he had acted. He had saved lives. And though he could never truly grasp the scope of that responsibility, he could feel the importance of it in his bones. Officer Williams walked over to Rex, kneeling down to rub the dog's head. Rex looked up at him, his eyes soft and steady, but there was a flicker of something deeper there, a recognition of the shared weight they both carried. Williams smiled faintly, his hand resting on Rex's strong back. "Good job, boy," he murmured quietly, as if acknowledging the depth of what had just happened. Rex didn't need the words to understand. In his heart, he knew the truth. He had done his duty. But it wasn't just about performing a task, it was about loyalty. It was about the bond between handler and dog, a partnership that had been forged in the trenches of countless missions, each one building upon the last. Rex knew that his loyalty to Williams was what made him strong, and it was what made their team unbreakable. As the final debriefing took place in the background, Rex stayed close to his handler, watching the proceedings with an observant eye. He could sense the gravity of the situation, but he also knew that his job was done. He had done everything he needed to do. The rest was up to the humans now. Rex's tail flicked gently against the floor, and a soft sigh escaped his lungs. He wasn't tired, he was simply content. The weight of responsibility had been lifted, and for now, the world was safe. It was moments like this that reminded Officer Williams of why he did what he did. There were no words that could express the depth of his gratitude for Rex's bravery. The dog had been there in the heat of the moment, saving lives without hesitation. And while the media would surely praise the operation and highlight the courage of the officers, it would be Rex who would remain in the shadows, unnoticed by most. But not by Williams. He knew that without Rex, today's success would have been impossible. The day was drawing to a close, and as Officer Williams prepared to leave, he gave Rex one last look. His hand rested on Rex's head, and the dog's eyes met his, filled with the same quiet understanding. Together, they had faced the unknown. Together, they had triumphed. And together, they would face whatever challenges the future might bring. For Rex, that was enough. And for Officer Williams, it was everything. The sun began to set over the sprawling airport, casting long shadows across the runways as the day came to a close. Inside the bustling terminal, the crowds had thinned, and the usual noise of arrivals and departures settled into a quieter hum. But for Rex, the police dog who had made headlines hours earlier, the day was far from over. As he lay in his kennel, panting lightly, his head resting on his paws, the enormity of his actions still lingered in the air. Rex had always been the quiet hero, the one who never sought attention or praise. He was a working dog, trained to detect anything out of the ordinary, to alert his handler, Officer Williams, and to protect the people around him with the same devotion he showed his own family. Today, however, was different. Today, Rex had done something that would forever define his legacy, even if he didn't understand the full weight of it just yet. As the hours passed and the evening air grew cooler, Rex's mind replayed the events of that fateful morning. He had been walking alongside Officer Williams, as he had done countless times before, when the unmistakable scent of something unusual reached his nose. His ears had perked, his body tensed, and without hesitation, he had rushed toward the unattended suitcase that seemed so out of place. His instincts had guided him, leading him straight to the source of danger, something that the humans hadn't yet detected. The memory of the moment still burned in his mind. The suitcase had smelled wrong, and as soon as Rex's nose touched the surface, a deep sense of urgency had washed over him. He hadn't known what was inside, but he knew something was off. It wasn't just the odd scent that triggered his response, it was the feeling in the pit of his stomach that told him he had to act, that every second mattered. And so, he did what he was trained to do, he alerted Officer Williams. The moment Officer Williams had opened the suitcase, the contents revealed a disturbing truth. Hidden inside was evidence of something far darker than anyone had expected, a plot that could have endangered lives. Rex had helped uncover a major threat, and though the authorities had quickly taken over, it was his quick thinking, his undying loyalty, and his courage that had made all the difference. As the airport had gone into lockdown, and the authorities had worked tirelessly to secure the area, Rex had stood to the side, watching carefully. He was exhausted, his paws aching from the sprint, his heart still pounding from the adrenaline of the chase. But despite the commotion around him, he remained calm, alert, and proud. He had done his job, and he had done it well. The authorities had praised the quick actions of Rex and Officer Williams in a public statement, calling their response critical in averting a potentially catastrophic situation. Yet, Rex didn't seek recognition or accolades. He wasn't interested in fame or glory. For him, there was no greater satisfaction than knowing he had kept people safe. He had no need for a hero's welcome or for anyone to tell him that he had done something extraordinary. His reward, the only one he needed, was the satisfaction of a job well done. As the day wore on, Rex's bond with Officer Williams grew even stronger. The two of them had been through countless missions together, but this one had tested them both in ways they hadn't expected. Officer Williams had always known that Rex was more than just a partner, he was family. They had trained together, lived together, and fought side by side for years. But today, Rex had proven something that no one could deny: his loyalty and courage were beyond measure. Later that evening, as Officer Williams sat beside Rex in the quiet of the kennel area, he couldn't help but reflect on what had transpired. He looked down at Rex, who was now lying peacefully on the floor, his eyes half closed in contentment. And if you like the story, remember to subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell. There was a softness in the officer's gaze, a deep appreciation for the dog who had just done something that could never be fully captured in words. Rex had saved lives, had protected countless people, and had done so without a second thought. He had put his trust in his handler, in his training, and in his instincts, and it had paid off. "You did good today, buddy," Officer Williams murmured, his voice full of pride. Rex's ears twitched at the sound of his voice, but he didn't move. He didn't need to. He knew he had done his job. He had heard the words of praise from the officials, but it was the quiet words from his partner that mattered most. Rex's tail gave a slight thump against the floor, but it was a soft and subtle gesture. He wasn't seeking approval, he was simply content knowing he had done what he was born to do. His loyalty was unwavering, and his sense of duty was absolute. This was his life, his world, his purpose. As the evening grew darker, Officer Williams stayed by Rex's side. The two of them had been through so much together, and though the world around them had changed in an instant, their bond had remained the same. Rex had always been there for him, and now, it was his turn to be there for Rex. They were more than just partners, they were a team. The following morning, Rex and Officer Williams were called back into action. There was no rest for the brave. But Rex didn't mind. He was always ready for whatever came next. The world may have been chaotic and unpredictable, but Rex had a clear understanding of his place in it. He was a protector, a guardian, and a friend. He had a role to play in this world, and he would continue to do so with the same dedication he had shown yesterday. And as they walked out the door of the kennel, Rex at the officer's side, they knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The events of the past day would remain with them, forever etched into their shared history. But there was no time for dwelling on the past. Rex was focused on the present, on the job at hand, and on the bond he shared with the man who trusted him with his life. In the months and years to come, the story of Rex's bravery would be told again and again. The authorities would speak of his quick thinking, his sharp instincts, and his unwavering courage. But Rex would remain humble. He would continue to do what he had always done, serve and protect, without fanfare or expectation. His legacy would be built not on the accolades or praise, but on the quiet, steadfast commitment to his work. For Rex, there was no greater reward than knowing that he had made a difference. And as long as he had the strength and the will, he would continue to do so. His legacy, the legacy of courage, loyalty, and service, would live on long after the headlines faded. It would live on in every life he had touched, and every person he had protected, and in every moment he had shared with his partner, Officer Williams. As they walked out into the light of the new day, Rex and Officer Williams knew that their journey was far from over. Together, They would face whatever the world had to offer, with the same unshakable bond that had carried them through countless challenges before. The story of Rex, the police dog who had saved lives and protected his people, would never be forgotten. It would live on, not in the headlines, but in the hearts of those who knew him best. For Rex, there was no greater legacy than the quiet confidence of knowing that, every day, he had done his job, and that was enough. And if you like the story, remember to subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell.